Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call it when you successfully hit a bunch of notes at once in a rhythm game?
I don't know. What do you call it?
A star chord. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your Groot host, Madelyn.
I'm your cold host, Emma.
Just the truth. Not themed.
It has nothing to do with the games, just felt like I should share that it's very cold where I am.
Not as cold as yesterday, though.
Oh, yeah, sure. You're right. It's noon on Sunday.
Anyway,
The cold made me forget.
Thanks for tuning into the show. This week, as you certainly did not guess from the opening joke in quotation marks, we're going to be talking about Rhythm Heaven and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
That was a better joke than some of your usual ones. It wasn't just a title of the game said with an upwards inflection.
You're right. It was sort of a character from one of the games said with an upwards inflection.
Yeah, step up.
The trick is that I don't really think it functions as a joke outside of the context of a podcast about Rhythm Heaven and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Not that most of my jokes do, but you know what I mean? The only funny part of this is that those are the two games this week.
I think you could put that was a star chord into like a little aside in the Guardians of the Galaxy universe where Peter Quill is playing a rhythm game.
You're probably right. That would work.
That would work as a joke.
Yes. Marvel, hire me. Do I have one line for you?
If James Gunn is listening, you can use that for free.
All yours. Two very musical games this week, huh?
Yes.
Two unstream safe games. Rhythm
Yes.
Heaven is probably stream safe, but you know. The dangers of music.
Yes.
Well, are we ready to dive into some beats?
Ready
Let's
to
do
go.
it. So Rhythm Heaven, also known as Rhythm Paradise in Europe and Rhythm World in Korea, was developed by Nintendo SPD, one of Nintendo's internal development teams, for the DS. And even though it's the first game in the series that was released in the US, it actually is the second game in the Rhythm series, which started with Rhythm Tengoku, which was GBA only and Japan only. But Rhythm Heaven, our game of the week, came out in Japan in 2008 and elsewhere in 2009. And it's more or less what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Although you could argue about the heaven part, probably.
You're right.
Depending on how good you are at rhythm.
That's very true. Well, the goal of the game was apparently to teach the Japanese people rhythm. They talk about that a lot. That a big goal of the game was that they wanted the Japanese people to have a better sense of rhythm.
It's an admirable thing to strive for, I guess.
Big burn to put in your promotional stuff, but, you know.
I mean, they talked about in one of the interviews you sent me about them, like, taking, like, dance lessons to improve their sense of rhythm, right? The development team. So it's a burn, but it's directed at themselves as well, I think. So
You're right. So Rhythm Heaven it's kind of like WarioWare if it was all rhythm games, more or less. Which is not that surprising because it's made by a lot of the same people who made many of the early WarioWare games. So you can definitely see the influence in art style and in kind of game style.
the mashups that happen where each, like, mini game for each rhythm thing, like, appears together in a song is pretty much WarioWare. It's like a bunch of little micro games that you have to respond to.
Exactly. So the way the game works is, at the time it was sort of, maybe not risky exactly, but it was a little different that they were making a rhythm game that wasn't like, you saw the notes coming and you pressed the notes. So it wasn't like a DDR style sort of thing. Instead, it was a rhythm game where you were cued basically entirely by the music as to how you were supposed to interact with the game. Which, yeah, they seem to have been very nervous about how that was going to go. Now it's like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, a rhythm game where you're cued by the music, that seems like the most natural thing in the world. But at the time...
Well, is that true? Is that something that's common now?
I guess not.
So.
Maybe I don't mean that. Maybe I just mean that hearing that doesn't sound like, nothing about that idea sounds weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but the modern rhythm games that I can think of, all you see what is coming.
Maybe I've just been playing too much WarioWare.
Like the dancing games are the ones that are most prevalent now, I think.
Dancing games, theatre rhythm, right?
Yeah.
That's true. I guess I should say there's a limited amount of rhythm games that exist to begin with, I guess.
Yes.
And it was interesting to me to hear the developing team talk about, how this was kind of like a risky thing, which I guess, of course, it is quite different. But usually when someone describes an idea that's risky for a game, you can hear them describe it and be like, oh yeah, that is kind of weird. Whereas with this, saying, the music is going to cue you of how to move to the rhythm. It's like, yeah. It is.
Well, they are operating under the impression that people have terrible senses of rhythm, so...
They do at the very least. Anyway, the game is split into kind of 10 sets of 4 little rhythm mini games, and at the end, as Emma said, you do this kind of remix level with new tunes that brings that set of 4 together. And you do pretty much all of this with the stylus. The original Rhythm Tengoku on the GBA obviously was button based, and the future games on the Wii and I don't know, the 3DS one, I'm actually not sure of if it's combo or what it is. But the game after Rhythm Heaven on the Wii, which is Rhythm Heaven Fever in the US anyway, was all button based, and it was interesting to read a little bit about the decision making process behind each of those choices for each of the different systems. I would never have thought about this, even though... So I've played Rhythm Heaven. I wasn't totally sure if I had played Rhythm Heaven, and then I saw a picture of the 3 guys with big heads that you make sing.
Yeah.
And suddenly it all came flooding back. It's like, those guys. I was like, I remember those guys. But I didn't cheat. I did not use a game that I haven't played, like, in this decade, probably, to be my game for the week. I did play some of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, too. But it didn't... Well, I remember sometimes inputs in this game being challenging. I was also, like, not an experienced game person, so that's, like, take that with a grain of salt. But it was interesting to hear the development team talk about how hard it was to figure out how to use the stylus for a rhythm game precisely enough. That's not something that would have ever occurred to me as hard.
Is it just because there's more delay there?
Yeah, or like inputting a button, you can be very precise, and doing a stylus, it's a lot harder to kind of time it right or time the input right. And so that's why the flicking motion is something that they really worked really hard on, I guess, because it kind of is, you're able to be a little more precise and that you tap and then you flick. Even though flicking motions, I think, are flicking motions are the bane of my existence on the DS.
Why?
They're just hard to do.
Why?
I have no rhythm, is what I'm saying.
Oh, of course.
Or what I'm thinking of is me trying to replicate a flicking motion or the scratching motion from The World Ends With You on my Switch one. It's like, oh, this is going great.
Yeah, I would say a flicking motion's a lot easier on with a stylus than it is with motion controls.
Absolutely. And that's why they kind of, not exactly that, but it was interesting to me. I've only ever played the Rhythm Heaven on the DS. I don't think I've ever played the Wii one. But of course, naturally, what you'd think of with the Wii is the motion controls. right? It's the hallmark of the Wii, and given that they had already moved it from button-based to stylus-based, from Tengoku to Rhythm Heaven, naturally you'd kind of think, oh, it's definitely going to be like motion control-based for the Wii one, right? But I don't know, maybe all these guys just have really weak wrists, right? But they were like, this is too much motion. Like,
the
this
Wii
would be
mode
way
is
more
heavy.
motion. Yeah. It was basically like, you do so much motion in this game in short periods of time that it's not going to be fun if you have to be doing motion control for all of it. And so on the Wii, it's actually button-based.
That makes sense to me.
It does.
In case you were wondering,
funny.
The 3DS one, the default control scheme is just buttons, but it can be played with the stylus, but it is simplified controls with the stylus.
Got it. I was going to say, that must have been a nightmare if they had to make it two separate ways. But that makes sense. Especially because Megamix, I think, it's not totally a greatest hits collection, but it's a good portion of it is.
70 taken from previous titles, and then 30 brand new rhythm games, plus new remixes.
Well, there you go. So yeah, Rhythm Heaven came out, like we said, in 2009. Then the Wii game came out in 2012. Megamix in 2016, I think, 2015, 2016. And there has not been a Rhythm Heaven game since then. Despite the fact that these games, in addition to being made by, obviously, a Nintendo team, they're also made by a Japanese musician and, like, lyricist producer named Sunku.
Yeah.
And so he has talked about wanting one for the Switch, despite the fact that this guy finished the last game, like, unable to speak. Which is wild. Is very Beethoven wild to me. Like, he had cancer and he had his larynx removed. So this producer of, like, a music game, like, while he was working on Megamix, like, could no longer sing, talk, etc.
I mean, it's just... I mean, people should work when they want to work, I guess, but it's sort of an indictment of Japanese work culture, I think. I know just recently, like, there was this whole hubbub about, like, the Final Fantasy XIV composer composing all the music for Endwalker while he was being treated for cancer. And it's like, maybe he should just be treated for cancer. I mean, if it helps you to compose music while you're going through cancer treatment, I guess. But, yeah.
It's definitely dark.
Yeah.
He seemed cheerful about it in the interview he did. But anyway, he has more recently come out and said that he wants one on the Switch, which is cool. But the unfortunate thing is, the development team doesn't really exist anymore. Mm-hmm. SPD was absorbed into, like, some other Nintendo arm kind of shortly after the release of Megamix. And so it's like, from everything, there's some great Iwata Asks interviews around the various Rhythm Heavens that are, like, really interesting to read and that I will probably talk about a bunch in the next few minutes. But the biggest takeaway from those for me was just like, oh, like, for Rhythm Heaven, it seems like it was, like, 5 dudes making this game.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, maybe that's it. And, like, particularly with that one, the interview is, like, stunningly them all just absolutely, like, roasting the heck out of this one guy who was kind of, like, the creative lead on it and, like, the visionary on it. And them being like, yeah, we just kind of had to wait for him to figure it out and kind of help him figure it out and, like, send him kittens so he doesn't feel bad.
Yes, that's Osawa Kazuyoshi was the director on the original Rhythm Tengoku.
And so it's like, it's totally, like, this is a game that seems like very much like it was definitely not a project that Nintendo seems to have expected to do particularly well in the beginning. And then, like, it did. And they were like, okay, like, I guess we'll make more. And it's still gonna be these, it just seems like these games have been made very much, like, by the passion of, like, a couple of people. And without those, the company's, like, less interested in it.
I feel like that's the case with a lot of more odd projects, though, especially coming out of, like, bigger game companies. I feel like we've had stories like that before, where it was like, they just sort of made it, and then... Like, I feel like, was that something that happened with WarioWare, too?
Yeah, WarioWare definitely.
Like, they just kept, like, sending people, like, on the side to help work on it. It wasn't really, like, a dedicated team or something like that.
But I feel like the release of the new WarioWare gives hope to a new Rhythm Heaven, you know?
Yeah.
If you're out there waiting for it. I feel like, given that they've finally made a WarioWare for the Switch, maybe Rhythm Heaven could come too.
Yeah. I'd be down for a Rhythm Heaven. I'm not really into rhythm games, but there's just the little quirkiness of this one with the funny little characters doing funny little things is really appealing. So
we got dangerously into WarioWare here, as you know, listeners. And we also, for about a week, got dangerously into Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory.
I remember that, yeah.
So, like, maybe
Sephiroth.
Heaven. Oh, man. I can, like, feel it, and I can, like, hear the button presses, and, like, see Good Boyfriend going, like, Sephiroth with his controller. Can feel that in my bones. Same with Vector to the Heavens. I can, like, hear the button presses. It's bad. Anyway, maybe this wouldn't be. This would be dangerous for me. But Rhythm Heaven it was interesting. I feel like it tied into our Games for Beginners episode that we did a little while ago. Because the dev team talks about that a lot. They talk a lot about how they want it to be, like, balanced to being challenging, but also kind of accessible to people who don't necessarily play games as much or as familiar with playing games. And so all the mini games have a practice session, and there's a lot of ways that it's very considerate about teaching you how to play. And of course, it's just a game that you play with a stylus, so how hard can it be?
Yes, they're not particularly complicated button inputs that you need to figure out how to deal with.
It was interesting to me, though, to read the interview about them talking about some of the design process and thought behind the Wii game, and this was true sort of for the DS one as well. But the Wii game, you know, despite being on the Nintendo Wii, famed for, like, many multiplayer kind of casual game type things, right? Wii Sports. The Rhythm Heaven on the Wii, Rhythm Heaven Fever, does not have a multiplayer mode. However, they talked a lot in the interview about how, you know, they didn't want to make a multiplayer mode because they weren't interested in that kind of competitive element to it, and because when you're playing multiplayer, you know, the fun part of watching this game is watching someone fail. And, like, watching them fail and being like, no, like, I could do that. If I tried it, I could do that. That's so easy. And then trying it, and of course, it's not as easy as it looks.
Right.
And so it was designed with the idea of you're playing it with friends because it's deliberately fun to watch and engage with that way. And that actually including a multiplayer element actually really diminishes that kind of fun because you're so busy watching what you're doing that you can't laugh at your friend failing.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really interesting design ethos.
I also see, like, why you wouldn't necessarily want competition in that it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, it's like if someone's, like, really good and you're failing at everything that you do together, it eliminates that sense of whimsy in something that's already, like, hard to master, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It turns it into something where it's like someone can be the expert Guitar Hero person or the expert DDR person, and it's like, why am I even bothering when they're over there destroying it?
I mean, that can still happen, but you're not directly comparing, like, they're not, like, side by side, you know, like, try again versus superb or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was interesting to me as, like, a multiplayer thing we don't necessarily see. I don't know, why do you think there are not that many rhythm games in the world? Do you think there should be more?
People have bad senses of rhythm. Didn't you know?
It's probably true.
No, I just think that it's girly. That's my answer to anything like that. It's like, well, that's a more girly type of game. So I mean, people liked Crypt of the Necrodancer, although I think it really picked up when they got the Zelda tie-in, so...
Mm.
And that still has, like, combat baked in, so it's a little bit manly, you know?
Yeah. Sayonara Wild Hearts, I think, but it's not a rhythm game like this.
Yeah, that's girly, right? That's a girly game.
A little bit. Sorta.
It's got Queen Latifah.
That's so weird for that. That's such a weird choice for that game. Doesn't make any sense.
I mean, like, that's why you see, like, certain things arise in the indie sphere so much, is because there's a demand for that kind of game, but the consumer base is just, you know, being paid attention to now.
But see, then it's fascinating that this game even got made, because sort of throughout the interviews, every once in a while there's just like funny little bits where they're like, so like they made an arcade game version of Rhythm Heaven, right? Because Sega's dev team liked it so much that they were like, we want to make one. And they were all like, okay, like, why would you want to do this? But okay. And then one of the guys on the core Nintendo team was like, yeah, I went and saw it, and there were a bunch of girls playing, and like, that's crazy, because like, you sort of know there are girls playing your games, but like, there they were playing it.
Yeah.
And then I was taking pictures of them, and I got pulled into the office, and I had to explain.
I didn't read that in the interview. Did I skip over it somehow?
You must have missed it. He was like, I was taking photos for like records to like show people, and like, understandably, the arcade people like pulled me aside, and I had to explain.
That makes sense.
But yeah, it's just that's lame though. What's girly about an onion plucking his mustache?
That one's from WarioWare, right? Or is that one?
That's from this one too.
That's from this one?
It's garlic in WarioWare.
Oh, okay.
Onions in this game.
I don't know. It's just, it's cutesy, it's musical, it's colorful.
Yes, music is for girls.
Kinda. I don't know.
I also think some early accessibility stuff sprinkled in here. Left-handed mode. Imagine having to think about that.
I mean, a lot of DS games thought about that.
I know.
That's just like a symptom of being on the DS, is you had to have a left-handed mode, because so you have to hold the stylus.
Lefties. It was also interesting to me, and this was a sort of a through line from WarioWare, to read a little bit about the development process for this. And, you know, obviously in these like Nintendo interviews, like, they're not going to come out and say like it was horrible.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. But they're still charming, and they feel like enough true. These people seem awkward enough that they seem enough true that it's fine. But it was interesting to hear them kind of talk about how in games that are small like this, where you're making these small mini games, there's you spend a lot less of the time working on stuff that's like not fun. Because you get to see it all come together so quickly. So like very rarely are you working on something that you don't immediately get to see it kind of play and see if it works and see if it's fun. Which I'm sure no game design is like that now. Surely things are just too complicated for anything to feel like that ever.
Certainly not like as you're working on the beginnings, I think.
Yeah. Well, it seems, I mean, you know, in these interviews too, they commented on that being really weird, even in like 2009 when this interview was happening. They were like, this is a weird, small, like tiny team. And like, you kept asking if it was okay that the team was tiny. And I kept saying, I guess. So it's like, oh, okay. Like, how could you make a game that was functionally made by 5 people now for Nintendo? You probably couldn't.
Yeah.
Should there be a AAA rhythm game? What should it be?
Is that Beat Saber?
Oh, I guess so.
I don't know if that's AAA. I just know that's popular.
Beat Saber's popular, yeah.
I mean, AAA doesn't mean popular. No,
I know.
Just
I
throwing that out there.
I understand what AAA means. I know that. I just meant, should Nintendo resurrect Rhythm Heaven, and how?
Yeah. They don't have to do anything different. Just put it on the Switch. Easy money. Nintendo doesn't understand the concept of easy money.
They're all just laying on their piles of Animal Crossing money, Emma. They don't need any more money.
That's correct. You're right.
They're like, easy money? We don't need that. We already have so much easy money. What's the point?
Like, Breath of the Wild 2 is going to come out, and then we'll never need money again. So...
There you go. Anything else you want to say about Rhythm Heaven? I remember it being sort of fun.
Yeah.
I also remember it being difficult. I did remember the, 3 opportunities to get a perfect thing and how stressful that was.
Yeah.
So, ready to move on to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
How much was this game hurt by the terrible Marvel's Avengers that came out?
I mean, that was when it was initially announced, and, Square spent, most of their very short E3 on it. People were complaining about that, but that was, its announcement. People knew about it before that, but that's when they revealed it to the world. Whatever. And
it was probably more time than it needed. I watched that. I think you could have gotten the same impact from 10 minutes as opposed to 15, but yeah.
Whatever. No marketing can make anyone happy is what I've learned from this year.
That's true.
It's either way too much or not enough. It's always something. But I do think the initial impression when it was revealed was hurt by Avengers being itself. But it is distinctly different from Avengers in that it is not... It is exclusively a single-player action-adventure game. It doesn't have any sort of tacked-on multiplayer online live service element to it. Which people... if you read the reviews for Avengers, people liked the main storyline of that pretty well, the single-player campaign. It just, felt like it could have been better if they hadn't been probably forced by Square to make the live service element on top of that. So, hopefully... I hope Guardians of the Galaxy did pretty well, and that they're maybe this is still the future. And I hope they don't make NFTs. So...
I know, I was gonna ask, is there a future? And not to say, of course there's some future for single-player, non-online experiences, right? It's not me saying, those will never appear ever again. But I was going to ask, is there a future for that? And, of course there's not, because everything has to have an NFT now.
Yeah. I don't... there was, a few years ago, and every other few years, there's, some sort of doom article about, the end of single-player, and it never comes true, right? But I do think Guardians of the Galaxy is something it's an Uncharted right? In terms of its, there's corridors, and, there's story, and there's some action elements, and it's a pretty, tight and finished experience while still being, not, The Last of Us, right. I guess.
It doesn't, it's not,
It's breezy and fun, I guess.
Yeah. It's a dying thing, I think, both in... Maybe it's not dying, I don't mean to say that. I mean, it's often heralded as a dying thing in both big video games and big movies. And I think less so in television, to be honest. The, crowd-pleasing blockbuster, but that's for adults.
Mm-hmm.
Or, the crowd-pleasing movie that does pretty well for adults. It's hard to make those now. It's hard to make a mid-budget, and by being mid, I mean mid-budget on the very, very large budget scale movie, and make that happen because, everyone will go see Spider-Man, and you might be able to hit it big with a small budget movie if it hits it big. But it's tough to have something in that mid space anymore because it just, who knows what will happen in the mythical post-pandemic days, right? But even apart from the pandemic as a thing, people just don't go to the movies in the same way. And similarly, if your game isn't raking in billions of dollars of microtransaction money, how does the economics of it work? I won't pretend to know, but surely they've left a lot of money on the table by not selling costumes, special costumes, or something like that.
Well, I don't actually know if it has anything like that. Like,
I know there's a digital deluxe edition where you get some like bonus stuff. It's like an extra $10, but as far as I've seen, there's no cosmetics to purchase. You can find them.
I don't mind cosmetics, to be perfectly honest.
I don't even mean that as a dig. I just mean this game is unusually microtransaction free, even the microtransactions that are less exploitative. And you wonder how they came to that choice.
I do have to wonder if like Avengers came out and Eidos Montreal was able to be like,
this went badly. Yeah. You want that again?
If that helped them, I mean, who knows how the development went, but if that helped them talk them out of adding a live service element or something like that, who knows? But yeah, like I said, I really don't think as long as JRPGs are a thing, single player games will never die. But in terms of like Western releases, the Sonys, right, are like, I guess Spider-Man's still kind of also like this. So we're seeing this, I guess, with Marvel games exclusively. But like The Last of Us is so like prestige in its presentation, and stuff like, Horizon Zero Dawn and Ghost of Tsushima are like big open world type things. Whereas this is like, you've got a campaign and you go through it type of game.
Which I appreciate. This is a game... Alright, time for the Madelyn review of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Mm-hmm. So, I've played like a little over an hour of it so far. Still in the part that's like recognizably the part that Square showed at E3. Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying it. It's easy, it's breezy. I like the trend in games of kind of constant patter dialogue. It doesn't always have to be as constant as this game, because it's obviously kind of like what this game is. Yeah. But I like that that's something that's showing up more and more in games, because it's a great way to add character flavor without me having to read like every lore book that I find, or spend a lot of extra time like reading text boxes as I go, that kind of thing. So I like it. I think it's clever. And yeah, I can already see how the combat is going to get like, whatever. But that's fine. I'm not especially picky about my combat. So while it's definitely kind of a Final Fantasy VII Remake light sort of deal, that's okay. Like, even if it gets a little bit boring, frustrating by the end, it's not so bad that it's detracting from the experience of like chilling with my buds. Mm-hmm. What is detracting from the experience, and Emma was talking to me before the air of like, maybe my PlayStation just sucks, which is valid, given some of the performance issues I've encountered over the past few months, and I'm going to try to clear some storage to fix this. But right now, it is very stuttery. And that's sometimes being like literal, like a lot of like motion freezes on the screen, but it's also, even when it seems to be running fine, like sometimes characters will skip the first couple words of their dialogue before it jumps in. And that's not working great for me in a game that's major sell, is kind of the dialogue patter that's happening. Mm-hmm. So more of a report in the 6 weeks of gaming next week, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping that if I delete a couple of the Yakuza games that are cluttering up the hard drive, that maybe having a little more space, because of course this still had like a 45 gigabyte download even though I have a disc for it, which is unconscionable. Really, but whatever.
Do you not remember Final Fantasy VII Remake?
I guess like
I did 70 gigs with the disc.
Did I get that one on disc? I can't remember.
Either way, it's the same amount that you download.
That's so dumb. Whatever. It was a lot cheaper to get it on disc. If you're on the fence about this game, it's $30 at both Amazon and GameStop. So that made it a lot easier. Like, I was almost not going to get this game for the show because I was like, $60 for the PS4 version. Like, I don't know. Avengers was bad, right? Even though I knew this one had gotten better reviews and was supposed to be better. But I'm a little nervous. I was hopeful to not have the, like, lovely stuttery loading of Telltale's Guardians of the Galaxy that I'm sure that you experienced there. And now I have the lovely stuttery loading in this, like, very pretty looking game.
Yeah. I want to get it when I have some spare time for it, just because it looks so pretty. I don't know. I watched a few videos of, like, overviews and, like, looking at, like, the art direction of it, and they showed, like, 5 different, completely different looking environments, which is wild to think about them making for, like, a 20-hour game, right?
Yeah.
But is necessary for selling this sort of, like, galaxy hopping experience, right? But yeah, I've been writing a little bit about how much I like Scarlet Nexus's art direction, and what I've seen of this reminds me of that a little bit, except a little bit more natural instead of artificial, I guess. So yeah, like, I saw it in the trailers they showed too, like, it's just so colorful in comparison to a lot of this sort of stuff. Like, even, like, Spider-Man is so much more colorful than that. Which is just a nice change, I think.
I do wish they'd made a bolder design choice with Star-Lord. I think the other 4 of them look great. I think he looks a little bland.
A little what?
Bland.
Bland? I do appreciate at least that...
Well, he's not Chris Pratt. I'm glad about that.
They all look recognizable, but different from their MCU counterparts, in a way that I remember the Avengers game didn't really manage. Like, they looked just like discount versions of the MCU counterparts. Whereas I don't look at their Star-Lord and think, that's Chris Pratt, because he looks like a different person.
Right. I look at him, I think, that's Mario.
Mario?
I'm just kidding, because it's Chris Pratt. Anyway.
Oh, you're right. Sorry.
No, like, I just wish, like, he's just a little bit too, like, bland white guy, and I wish that if they weren't trying to emulate MCU...
I do appreciate his, like, 80s hair.
Yeah.
It's, like, up and back. I don't know. It feels good. Like, it's like, yeah, of course he would have, like, retro kind of hair.
I basically have no complaints except that his face is boring looking. Look, you don't see his face. Like, this is a Skyrim situation, right? It's like, I don't see his face like that often. It's not first person, sorry. But, like, it's not that I'm staring at his face a ton. It's just like, oh, okay, like, you could have made a slightly bolder choice here, and I think it would have been better. Instead, he looks the most uncanny valley of the 5 of them, I would say. And 2 of the others are green, and one of them is Groot. So,
well, that might help, actually. The fact that he is the only, like, full human one might be making it more difficult, I guess. Design-wise.
Fair enough. Anyway, in case you're not familiar with Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, let me give you the basic info about the game, like 15 minutes, 10 minutes into us talking about it. It's from Eidos Montreal. Emma mentioned this, published by Square Enix, for Windows, the Switch, although on the cloud. And if the performance on my base PS4 is anything to go by, I would read some reviews about the Switch Cloud before you go for that version.
I think that sort of depends on your internet strength.
Right. I would read some reviews of your internet.
Yes. It's like, I think that's going to run, the cloud version of anything I think is going to run, like, distinctly differently depending on how strong your internet is.
Right. So it's on PS4 and PS5. It's on Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S. So you can play it on the system of your choice. Hope if you have a nicer system, choose that one.
Yeah.
It's going to run better. And yeah, you play as Star-Lord or Peter Quill, and you're hanging out with the other Guardians, including Gamora, Rocket Raccoon, Groot, and Drax, and doing a bunch of fighting and chatting as you jump around the galaxy trying to save it after you mess something up. I haven't read too many story spoilers on this one because I was thinking I'd actually play it. I will play it as long as I can figure out the frame rate drops.
Yeah. It won Best Narrative at the Game Awards.
Well, I respect the Game Awards, so... Prestigious.
I've seen tons of praise for its narrative, for one thing. So
no, I know. That was
it's
just
writing.
a knock on the Game Awards. Don't mind me.
I did read one article. They were talking with, like, Marvel Games about, like, how they crafted, like, their partnership with Eidos Montreal. They gave, like, some whole thing about, like, creator focused, right? That felt like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Focused.
But, like, the intro of that article was, like, there were some heavy hitters, you know, like Deathloop and It Takes Two were nominated for Best Narrative. I was like, both those games, the narrative is, like, the worst part about them, is all I've heard.
Yeah.
So, it's like, oh yeah, heavy hitters.
It Takes Two was great. Well, you know, it being Guardians of the Galaxy, and Emma mentioned Star-Lord's 80s hair. There's a lot of 80s influence, as is their aesthetic here. So as long as you are not playing and just, you know, displaying your play on Twitch and YouTube, there's some lovely 80s music pretty much all the time.
I should have looked into this. How do they handle streamer mode? Do you know? Do they have generic music?
They have generic. Well,
okay.
They have some generic music. It seems to me like sometimes it's just silence, but like for battles and stuff, there's generic music.
Yeah. Because I had seen, like, clips of, like, the new Life is Strange that's just silence when there's licensed music and they're, like, dancing around. It's hard. I don't know how you handle that. I guess streaming games is technically illegal, too, if you are being super technical about it, but...
I guess. Man, imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine somebody trying to do that.
I mean, it's become so ubiquitous now that, like, if you did that, you would get massive backlash, unless you're Nintendo and you can be inconsistent about it however you like, I guess. But, like, you know, with music and movies and TV, it's like, no, you know. But games have somehow gotten away with it, unless they have their licensed music, you know?
Well, there's, you know, and obviously this would be something you'd have to argue in court, right? Fair use doesn't protect you from going to court. But I think the idea is probably with streaming games, there's more of a transformative element than the TV meta, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So I could see that argument there. But yeah, this does feel like the kind of, like, man, playing Guardians of the Galaxy without any 80s music, like, come on.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah.
It's not game breaking or anything, but, like, that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, bold of them, like, I guess they kind of have to, right? Like, what a bummer this game would be if it didn't have that music, but it is interesting. Everyone was kind of shocked about the amount of licensed music they had, which is kind of sad in itself, right? I feel like licensed music used to be such a real highlight in games, like 15 or 20 years ago. And now it's like, there is licensed music? Shocking.
They did apparently also make, like, an album's worth of original music for a fake 80s band, Star-Lord.
Right, I was listening to them at the beginning, yeah. Because why not?
Yeah. I mean, ideally you would be able to do that. That would be cool as something to do for, like, all the music in the game, I guess. But also, like, you want to get the classics in there because that's what this franchise is, you know? Yeah. And also, I imagine that would be hard to make, like, a whole variety of authentically 80s songs to play.
Yeah. Do you think that superheroes are the commedia dell'arte characters of our time?
I don't know what that means.
I mean, do you think that superhero characters are like the archetypes of our time? Like Spider-Man and Star-Lord, and like everybody gets to tell their own.
Is this the modern myths thing?
Perhaps a little bit.
That was like on Twitter for a while.
The modern myths thing that I wrote a published academic paper about, I think is what you mean.
You're right.
But no, I just mean, like, so what's interesting, or sort of interesting at least, that was too harsh. What's interesting about this game is that, you know, I guess these aren't so rare, but it's the semi-rare Marvel property that doesn't have to be tied into the MCU. And isn't tied into the MCU and doesn't really try to be, and even doesn't really care that much about comics continuity. And so that's both unusual to see, but also, like, you know, we can have the 3 dudes who played 3 different versions of Spider-Man all come together in the same movie, right? So it's interesting to me that, in some ways, like, our character archetypes aren't, like, you know, the lover and the like thief and like all of the Commedia characters or anything like that anymore. Instead, it's Spider-Man and Batman and Star-Lord.
I feel like that would be more have a stronger argument if Marvel hadn't made such a chokehold on these characters with MCU stuff. Like, you can definitely find that, like, Batman, there's so many versions of Batman, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of, like, and you know, maybe if you get into comics and, like, animated shows, you get more of this. But in the modern day, like, they have taken these archetypes and they're like, no, it's Robert Downey Jr. now, you know?
Yeah.
That's Iron Man. Doesn't get to be anybody else. That I think weakens that argument because of capitalism, I guess.
You know that had there been an Italian Disney equivalent during the years of Commedia, they'd have been like, no, Puccinella is this guy.
Exactly. You're right.
Well, are you ready to do a mix, do a mash, do a remix?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Music.
Guitar Hero, but shooty.
I wish more people had made more games with the guitar. I talked on this on an episode not that long ago, I think. I wish more people had made more non-Guitar Hero games while everyone and their mother had a guitar attachment in their home.
Now just their mothers have it in the closet somewhere.
Do you think that'll ever come back? I'm sure we did. Do you think that'll ever come back? Do you think Guitar Hero will have a resurgence? You couldn't stream it, so probably not, right?
I was gonna say, I just really don't think that external, like, add-ons to controllers really have a chance anymore. But maybe when VR gets really ubiquitous. If there ever comes a time where, like, it's easier to get a VR headset, and those become more common, I could see maybe, like, specialized games in VR that also have, like, special controllers that you have to get.
That's interesting.
And maybe that could be a way that comes back. But
you don't think
that's my only guess.
You don't think that there's enough nostalgia for Guitar Hero? Like, if I was there, I'd be, like, watching the pandemic numbers closely so that I could do, like, a thing that's like, the pandemic's over, get your friends all together for Guitar Hero, just like you did in 7th grade.
Well, stuff like Harmonix is still making, like, music games. Harmonix just got bought by someone, right?
I don't know.
So it's just that these music games don't have, like, the guitar controller anymore. Whatever.
Bummer. I know, they really had everyone buying a microphone and guitars and a drum kit.
Do you think you could play Rhythm Heaven with, like, bongo, the, like, drum attachments to it?
I forgot that we had the, like, little tataki drum things, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that there is a way to make the game do that.
Yeah.
Whether the game is intended to do that, probably not.
Probably not.
But you could probably, that'd be pretty dope.
I think that'd be fun. That's not a mashup, though. That has nothing to do with
the game idea. Okay. I feel like I should probably try to just, like, I shouldn't pay too much attention to the Nintendo DS elements of it, because there's just nothing that can do that.
Yeah.
Touchscreens are dead.
Technically, the Switch still has a touchscreen.
Yeah, but nobody uses it.
Yes,
really.
You're right. Only The World Ends With You uses it.
Like, I use it when I'm typing things in and I happen to be in handheld mode. That's it. Okay, one of them's about heaven, one of them's about space.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe there's something there.
It's in space.
Is it like a rhythm game where it's like you're doing a rhythm game, but also you have to be like talking to your friends the whole time? Like there's a
God, that would suck. I don't want to play that game. Oh my god, the stress levels.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, okay, it's like it's a rhythm game, but at the same time, it's like you're making like dialogue choices as you go.
Oh, maybe we could do something like a little bit more like esoteric. Like it's like a co-op game, or like you could play it with strangers online, maybe. And like every once in a while, they're able to like throw something in to mess you up, right? Like some sort of random element onto the rhythm game that makes it harder for you. Like sort of bringing like the inspiration of like clashing teammates, right? But like making it a little bit more like just focused on the rhythm game of it.
Here's my problem with that. Both of these games are very thoughtful about the fact that they are single player experiences.
I guess so.
So there is something, well, I'm interested in that. There is something that feels like a betrayal of the source material to make a multiplayer online game out of it.
Okay.
Like we have to defend the single player experience, Emma. Here,
you're right.
It can be local co-op maybe, but we have to defend it.
Okay. Okay. Maybe. Instead. Okay, so you're like on a rocket ship, right, going through space, and the way that you keep your rocket ship going and moving is through rhythm. Is the way that you keep your rocket ship going and moving is through rhythm game, right?
Okay.
But you know, you also live on this rocket ship with other people, and they have their own responsibilities, but you're like in charge, right? Like you're the captain of this rocket ship. So sometimes they have problems with what they're working on, and so they come to you and like add like their rhythm into the rhythm that you're doing to make it like more complicated, because you have to deal with multiple things at once.
That's cool.
And you could do like different combinations of that to keep the rocket ship going.
And as you assign them to different tasks or talk to them about different things, they get good or bad at certain rhythm things.
Sure.
Like, you have teammates and they have certain abilities, right? And so it's like, oh, okay, you know, Rocket is really good at syncopated rhythms, but he's not good at slow tempo, right?
Sure.
Sort of things. And you can assign them and they can grow accordingly. It's not as good as my pitch for a rhythm game spin-off called Groovy Groot, but I'll take it.
I don't know. I'm down for Groovy Groot. Just Baby Groot dancing game?
Yeah, Baby Groot dancing game. All the lyrics are I am Groot.
Yeah.
You can make him yell, I am Groot. I am Groot.
It's like 2 80s songs, but the lyrics are all I am Groot, so technically it's parody.
There we go.
That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
Your Honor?
No, I think Rhythm Among Us sounds great.
Okay. There's not an imposter. You don't have to suss out the imposter while you're working on your rocket ship.
Fair enough. Well, listeners, do you have a better idea for how we resurrect the rhythm game from its girly death? How do you think Marvel's characters should be best used in video games? Are you Groot? if you have answers to any of these questions or anything else you want to say about the episode, you should follow us and interact with us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, where Emma's about to pull our next 2 talking fun things, and also read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, if you enjoy the show and you want to keep up with the conversation, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. So next week, side quest, 6 weeks in gaming. Also, don't know if you know, listeners, we're right here around the 5-year anniversary of Talk This Podcast.
Oh yeah.
Woo! So, not that I'll turn next week into like best games of the last 5 years or anything, but I'll shed a tear, get a little misty, maybe.
Okay.
This is my way of covering for the fact that I won't have finished any games, and it'll just be me like, I played some more Skyrim.
Okay.
So, anyway, get excited for that. But Emma, what will we be talking about in 2 weeks?
For our old game, we will be talking about Fatal Frame.
Isn't that a picture game?
Yes.
Cool.
And for our new game, we will be talking about Unpacking.
Oh, I've been meaning to play Unpacking.
It'll be an interesting mashup.
Yeah. You take pictures of your stuff and then it's like Marie Kondo. It's like you take a picture for the memento. I know that's probably not part of Marie Kondo. You take a picture of it and then you throw it away. And you take a picture of it and then you throw it away. Good. There's my mashup already. Mm-hmm. This is dangerous though. Emma, I'm playing so many games. I can't finish any of them because I'm playing too many.
Unpacking's short. You could probably finish it for the show.
Probably. I'd have to start it before, 2 hours before the show, though.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, tune in 2 weeks to see if I can manage that, and tune in next week to listen to what we've been playing recently. But that's it for the show. Emma, do you have a spicy sign-off this week?
This week, I hope that you work hard and improve your sense of rhythm.